Hello, hello. Am I on? There we go. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to do a rocket-firing Boba Fett panel, and the reason why is because I love rocket-firing Boba Fetts, and since I can't afford one yet, I figured I'd get a couple in the building, so I'm really excited about that. I do want to make an announcement. Anybody that wants to get into the cosplay contest, this is your last chance. Head on up to the entrance to VIP right by the con store over there and get your picture taken. We'll put you up on the Facebook page, and we'll get the votes, and then we'll bring up the cosplay contest later. Also, we're going to do something a little bit special here on Sunday. We're going to do a little something for your sweet tooth, make ICCC just a little bit sweeter. There will be free ice cream for everyone. So it'll be up there at the con store. Go on up, grab yourself an ice cream sandwich, enjoy your day. I would like to introduce these three wonderful super collectors that are collectors of Rocket Firing Boba Fett, and they are definitely the go-to guys if you have any questions, for sure. Something really cool that happened last year at ICCCon is Jason Knox made this really cool customized Imperial transport. And now this Imperial transport, it was a prototype a long time ago. And since it's not Boba Fett and it's an Imperial transport, not too many folks cared about it. But something that broke that we found out this year, we found out last year, Jason Knox showed that to Kim Simmons over there, who showed it to Jim Swearingen, who showed it to other collectors, and it went on, and this story has grown and grown, and it's given us new information, and it's given us new things to look into the timeline. And I think, personally, my favorite part about collecting vintage Star Wars toys, you can't finish, ever. All the information is not there. That hunt that we do, it doesn't just involve digging through the bins and trying to find something cool. It's trying to find out the history of these things. Because way back in the day, when they were made, people never thought they would turn into what they turned into. They were just toys. They were toys you got at Christmas, you ripped open, you played with, you had imagination, and you used in your backyard. They're no longer that. They're extremely valuable, extremely rare collectibles, and these three wonderful guys are going to come up and tell you about it, so come on up. You three in the corner talking to each other. Hey, Brian, Daryl, and Chris, please come to the stage. They're doing some last-minute notes, folks. But no, it's going to be an awesome time. They're going to come up here. They're going to pass around this microphone. I'm going to hop off, and I will go get myself some free ice cream. So enjoy the panel. Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
All right.
That's you?
Yeah,
Hello?
sitting, standing.
I'm here, you're there. Daryl? Welcome to the ICC Rocket Fett panel. I'm Brian Rockfall. I'm joined by Chris Jagulias and Daryl Johnson. Chris is a well-known collector and expert in Star Wars prototypes, and Daryl Johnson, another Rocket Fett enthusiast who made a discovery a few years ago that brought a little more insight into what was going on with the Rocket Fett toward the end of its development, and he'll be sharing that story with us a little later. Myself, I've been dealing and collecting in rare toys, Star Wars toys, for about 30 years now. And I was obsessed with the Rocket Fett since I was about 9 years old. And I think we're supposed to have a clicker up here. Is there a way to advance the slides? Is there a way to just quickly manually advance the slide? Not a problem. Oh, well, there we go. Okay, well, as you can see, we've got a lot to cover. I once heard the Rocket Fett referred to as the crown jewel of unproduced toys. And considering that it has gone on to become a legend in the Star Wars collector community, that's a title that I find is pretty appropriate. I can't think of another a prototype toy that's conjured false memories in people that remember playing with something as a child that never existed. Because by now we all know these never got out, and if you don't know that, let's get that out of the way right now. No one got these things in the mail. Fortunately, there are a lot of prototypes that exist. The prototype legacy of the figure is quite extensive, and I think more so than many other Star Wars figures, produced or unproduced. But before we go any deeper into these gorgeous figures, I want to turn things over to Chris Jagulius to bring us up to this point and give us an idea how this got going at Kenner in the first place. Chris.
Thank you, Brian. Sorry, I don't want to be too theatrical here. I'm not theatrical. I'm going to get into a little bit of background. I know everybody wants to talk toys, but like, where did Boba Fett come from? That's what I want to start with. I'm going to go back. There we go. Boba Fett. He was the brainchild of actually Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston. Ralph started with some of his early Darth Vader concepts of the helmet, and that they came up the idea with like making elite stormtroopers, a super trooper, and started working on concepts like that. And you can see immediately, some of the telltale signs that the established the classic look of Boba Fett. And Joe really was the father of Boba Fett. He took these over. These are all from like early February 1978. And, the elite super commando, they called him the super trooper. It was going to be an elite squad of stormtroopers. And pretty quickly it morphed into the idea of, George Lucas had an idea of having a bounty hunter in his series, and they morphed this into the bounty hunter character. And eventually gave him a name, Boba Fett. And by June '78, here he is. They've come up with a concept, a costume. He was still the white super trooper, but they were calling him Boba Fett then. But they did have their sketches for how his armor would look. The idea was he would have like a cobbled together armor. And since then, everybody's invented the whole Mandalorian mythos. But around July '78 is when Joe painted the costume. And these photos here are, you can see George Lucas there. The other guy in the photo is Dave Okada. You might remember him from the Toys That Made Us. He was the prelim design manager. The guy that took these photos is Jim Swearingen. So he's a guest here. And that was their visit to Lucasfilm to see the new character, see the costume, take photos. You can see this is a very early version of Boba Fett. The helmet has the painted eyes on top. And Jim's responsibility was to come back and create a concept model. Immediately when he got back to Kenner, he started working. So what he did, he's looked in-house, and they had most of the pieces that he needed there. So you can see what he took, 3 different action figures. They made some molds of those parts and cobbled them together. He used the Stormtrooper because it had more material on the head. And it's funny because there was the elite super trooper, so it's really funny that they took a stormtrooper who would have been a super trooper in Lucasfilm speak and then turned him into Boba Fett. And the missile mechanism came from a Mattel Shogun Warrior figure, this Raider figure. So you could see all these details, the arms match up. I think Ron Salvatore was the first one to really notice that, wow, these are like existing pieces. And the model shop made the chess pieces, and then the model shop converted the Shogun mechanism into the backpack. And here's some good shots. I mean, one is just the Shogun mechanism as is, and the second image is the very first version of the mechanism. And the second one is just to show kind of like they went to a pointed lathe missile, and they made it on a lathe, and then they went back to like to the Mattel rounded missile towards the end. I'll get back to that later, but you can see it's the exact same mechanism. And it was Cobb kit bashing is what they call it. Take pieces like model kits, put things together. In this case, it was all toys with some other styrene pieces to make a functioning preliminary concept figure. And they only ever made one, and here's like three iterations of the same figure. So the very first version has a vinyl cape, which they got rid of pretty quickly, but the vinyl cape was a prominent feature of the costume from the photo shoot. The middle is sort of like the classic version. You can see both of those first two still have the painted eyes on the helmet, and the last version comes from an internal product brochure. We're not quite sure if it's a specific stage or if they sort of stopped mid-stage, took the photos, and then finished painting it later, but that's was missing most of the black paint, and they've reduced the colors on that. And this little shot of it's a 3-inch binder, shows all these concept models. and the Boba Fett was one of those when they were doing the 21 backs. And they use these for real purposes. So the photo here is of the carrying case insert. This is the second version when the 20 back, the second wave of Star Wars figures came out. And you can see the photo of the, they put the figure in there and took the photo of it. And they also used it here on some early photography that was ported into the 32 display. And you can see there it is again. And once the prelim guys were done, this is around late summer, early fall, August '78, I think. They converted the figure, so it went to the production design team. So they had to make it more like a cost-effective, functional toy. So you can see one of the first things, they reduced all the colors. So they drastically reduced that. And each time you remove a color, you reduce cost. And they decided, they'll simplify the backpack. They took the colors down. They cut the jet pods off to make it more streamlined. And you can see those in there. And in Kim Simmons' new book's got great high-res photos of these images. And then you start with these photos here on the side, and Kenner created some artwork. And you guys are probably mostly familiar with this. This is the artwork that adorned the back of the action figures. They were really promoting this new character with an exciting action feature. No other Star Wars figure had a feature like this. And used these two pieces here to promote this. And internally, they created a marketing brochure. This is around August that they would have done this. The exclusive feature, it says, it's a little bit hard to see. It says rocket firing backpack with 2 spring-launched rockets. And that'll be important later. So this was the surf promotion. It's introducing Boba Fett as the new evil villain. And just to get this out to the sales force and start promoting this, showing that the packages will have this free Boba Fett premium on it. And from that point, the next step is to develop like a production sculpting. And these are photos of the actual action figure sculpting. And the collector that previously owned this actually had it. It was in the Louvre in France, in Paris, and in a special sci-fi exhibit. And I'm showing this off. It's pretty amazing that it still exists. It's wax, and most of the backpack is like styrene plastic that the model shop would have created. And they built the wax around that, and it's the classic look of the Kenner Boba Fett. And then from this wax, this step here in wax is the first step to the 3D of the produced action figure. And I think Brian's gonna step back up here. He's not paying attention. He's a little sleepy. You're next. And yeah. So now you guys will get to see things you've seen more photos of and more familiar with.
Thank you, Chris. I think we have one more photo here of the wax sculpt there, so you can see a little bit more of the back and the little plastic buck that the sculptor was presented with by the engineers at Kenner, because they already had an idea how they wanted to hold the firing mechanism, and so you get a look at it there. And ironically, for what we're going to be talking here about a rocket Fett, the sculpt is not rocket firing, as you can see. But the next step here is the Proto Mold. This is the earliest known rocket Fett in the hobby. And this would have been a figure created in-house at Kenner from prototype molds, hence the term Proto Mold. And it's still a little crude, but this is the first time they actually marry the rocket firing concept to the production sculpt design. And as you can see, on the slot there, it's open at the top, and it dips a little bit below the latch on the left there. I guess the idea was you could kind of supercharge the spring if you wanted to. But the spring on this example already was pretty strong, so I don't think you really needed to do that. If you can look through the coils of the spring there, if you're able to do so, you'll notice how this figure is white inside. And that is because these Proto Mold figures were all white when they were created, and they were fully hand-painted. Presumably, the missile would have been hand-painted as well, but when this particular example was discovered, there was no missile, so we just have it paired here with a typical four-sided first shot. And just to address the slot once again really quickly here, because it does dip below the latch, it's referred to as a T-slot. You could also call it a Proto L because that's eventually what it's going to morph into. You can also see in the spring, in the coils, there's some wax residue. That is because what we found out recently, this particular Proto Mold is actually the photo sample that was used in photography. And you can see some more evidence of this in the palm of the hand. There's a little bit of wax residue there as well. That would have been there to secure the blaster, and the wax, the coil, the wax in the spring would have been used to secure the missile. Because we know this particular, from experience, this particular Proto Mold doesn't latch too well. It will accidentally fire on you, and when it does, this fires with a nice audible snap, not a gentle little ding, so it'll throw the missile some distance. The other thing I found interesting is that the red wrist gauntlet appears to be painted over an orange undercoat. So it looks like before photography, it went through a last-minute transition. And I was kind of curious how this would look. So I used Photoshop to regress the color back to its original form, orange, and it doesn't look all that bad. I thought it was going to look horrible, but it looks kind of nice. And then it kind of clicked. It now starts looking like the kit-bashed Fett in its fourth and final version before it vanished. So it's nice to see how things kind of progressed along before everything got to photography. Now here you have two images of photo art. These are probably the most iconic images in the hobby of this Proto Mold. The images would have been taken by Roy Frankenfield, the original Kenner photographer before Kim Simmons came on board. And as photo art, his original images would have been idealized through airbrushing. And I didn't think it was going to be possible, but despite the airbrushing, we were still able to make a conclusive match between the figure in these two images and the existing Proto Mold. And you can see on the display to the left, on the header for the bin display, where those two iconic images were first used before they covered up the rocket firing feature with the ugly black sticker. And the display below, you can see where that gentleman took time to refill it so we can get an idea of what it looked like back in the day. The Proto Mold also features on other displays as well, the bell display. But by the time you get to the bell display, they no longer are talking about the rocket firing feature, so there's no need for a black sticker to cover anything up. But you get another good look at the Proto Mold in a reverse, The Proto Mold was also used in the second collector's case insert. We all fixate on the original one that Chris already showed us earlier because it has the kit bash, which was the real neat figure. But ironically, we were always looking at a rocket Fett. Now we know that this is also the photo sample, but even if it wasn't, we now know that this is it's a Proto Mold rocket Fett because there's a distinctive, and I hope you can see it on the monitors, but there's a distinctive gap between the helmet and the collar. And the overall look of the way the figure is painted tells you that this is a Proto Mold. And I'd always wondered if that particular neck gap was an exclusive trait to this particular figure, or it was a Proto Mold trait in general. And based on some new information that has come to light, I'm beginning to think it was a Proto Mold trait in general. So if another one ever showed up, it should also have that similar neck gap. So different pose, presumably the same Proto Mold figure. This is from the back of a 21 back card. But this pose with the raised arm was used all the way up into, I believe, the Empire Strikes Back cards, the second release of the Kenner Empire Strikes Back figures. So you were looking at a rocket Fett all the way up to the early 41 back cards. And if you were up in Canada, the Kenner Canada cards, the French-Canadian cards, they didn't always use a little black sticker to cover up the rocket firing mechanism. Some had this nifty little yellow sticker featuring the Proto Mold. So I guess to give the consumer a better idea what they're really going to get in the mail. And I think this is the only time you see the Proto Mold and the kit bashed on the same Kenner packaging. And I kind of thought that was neat, and I wanted to share that with you today. Something similar happens here. This is the 1979 catalog that was inserted with the vehicles and playsets at the time. And we shouldn't be surprised at this point they're still using the Proto Mold because by just having it shown from the front, you don't see the rocket firing feature at all. But there's another image of a Boba Fett in this catalog, and we have it circled there for you in yellow. In the catalog, it's just basically a postage stamp image. But fortunately, the transparency does survive, so we were able to blow it up, look at it better, isolate the figure, and it looks like we're looking at a different type of Boba Fett. Based on the missile height, it would suggest a rocket Fett, and it does look like it's a figure that is hand-painted, so that also would suggest an early prototype type of figure. But it's not fully hand-painted. So I'm thinking what we're probably looking at here is some sort of early painted first shot, so probably like an L slot, paired with the missile, which is already in the 8-sided phase. And this is just a better shot of both figures next to each other, the Proto Mold on the right and the one from the catalog on the left. Lighting and angle is quite a fair comparison, but you can kind of get the idea you're looking at two different types of figure. So these here are actual first shots here at this point. So these have been figures taken from molds that were being tooled or tooled for production. And you can see how some refinements have been made at this point. The neck gap that you would see in the Proto Mold is gone, and the slot for the firing mechanism is more refined. It's closed at the top now, making for a sturdier toy. And the groove does not go down below the latch anymore. So this is your typical L slot, but these are not your typical first shot colors. These two figures showed up, I believe, around the mid-90s. And when the yellow Fett was discovered, there was some excitement about the missile, because the missile being white, people assumed it might be a prototype type of missile. But the Proto Mold showing up a few years later kind of contradicts that, because we now know that Proto Mold already had the missile locked in the 4-sided design. So I'm not sure anymore what's going on with this particular white missile. Occam's razor. A lot of these rocket Fetts, when they were first discovered in the 90s, they weren't found with missiles. A lot of the missiles that are in the hobby today came from later finds. So it's possible whoever saved this particular figure at Kenner just paired it with a projectile so they'd have something to complete the look of the figure. Alternatively, and I just was thinking about this in preparation for this panel, since these figures were coming from different molds and they were being tooled elsewhere, perhaps they didn't have the missile tooled at this stage, so maybe just to kind of check form and fit, they might have lathed or salvaged a part to kind of just see where they were at that point. Either of those two explanations would explain that missile. The other first shot there really kind of is self-explanatory. It's just gorgeous. It captures the best of many worlds. You got the dynamic yellow of the yellow first shot, the blue-gray of a standard first shot, and these nice white arms, which are unique to an already unique figure. Because again, as I was explaining earlier, if I haven't already, these figures are unique to the hobby. I had thought maybe those limbs might be Proto Mold limbs because they're all white, but the texture and the look appears to be to preclude that. Now we got two more first shots here. The figure on the left, which looks really kind of blue, is more of a blue-gray. That is your typical first shot that would have been used just to test the molds to see how they're going to work for production. No copyright in the back of the legs like the other two first shots we discussed. This is definitely the figure you want to pair with a 4-sided missile. Now, when people ask about the populations of these figures, this specific example, we figure there's at least about 50 of them known in the hobby, so 50 plus. I don't know if that rises as high as 60, but this is the most common example that you're going to, as a collector, encounter if you're looking to try and find a rocket Fett. The one next to it is a little bit more of a conundrum. It's not blue-gray, it's a really light gray color, and unlike all the other first shots, this is at the stage where they've already added the copyright to the back of the legs. The slot for the slider is also more refined at this point. Now, there are only 3 examples known. They were found by one collector back late 90s from one Kenner source. I believe he was an engineer, and if I remember the story correctly, he had a couple other normal rocket Fett first shots and other first shots and engineering pilots of other assorted figures. Now, this gentleman couldn't remember too much about the missiles he found with these figures, but talking to another gentleman who remembered the find, he tells me there were 8-sided missiles and 4-sided missiles with the Discovery, and the missiles paired thus. There were enough 4-sided missiles to pair with the blue-gray Fetts without the copyright, and there were enough 8-sided missiles, 3 of them, to pair with the 3 gray Fetts, which makes me kind of wonder if we were getting closer to a production stage figure here before Kenner would have made the decision to start retooling the slot. Beyond that, we're still looking for more information on this, but these are very scarce rocket Fetts. And speaking of scarce rocket Fetts, we have 3 more here. These are first shots, like the blue one I was showing you earlier, except these are all hand-painted. You'll notice 2 are in more of a production paint scheme that seem to track through from the Proto Mold all the way through to the non-firing Fetts that were released. And the other one has this really nice alternate paint scheme, as you can see here. Now, some people have asked me why would they have done this? Why, if they already kind of knew where the paint scheme was locked, why would they paint one of these up in such a unique fashion? And from what I've learned about the gentleman who painted this specific first shot, and presumably the others, I was told he did about 5 or 6, he was trying to sell the concept to Kenner that they could put more effort into how they painted their figures. And he's known for having at least painted up one 12-inch Boba Fett to sell the concept. And I'm wondering if perhaps a figure like this was a holdover from that effort. Now, here's a close-up of one of the production paint scheme L's. I think this is the type of prototype that was photographed for that catalog we looked at earlier with the transparency. The missile height is about right, the color is right, and the way it's hand-painted seems to match that type of figure. Sadly, it's not the figure. The way the chest is painted on this one and the belt preclude that, but I think if we could turn that transparency around and magically get a look at the back, we would find it was a first shot like this, but with an 8-sided missile. I photographed this one with a 4-sided missile at the time. I want to talk a little about slot variations. A lot of people, they don't get into this type of minutia because they either have a rocket Fett or they want one. But with all the replicas and outright fakes that are out there now, you need to know more of the tolerances of what you can find. You can't just rely on absence of copyright on the back of the legs for authenticity. And as you see, there are 3 different slot types. You got one that slants, presumably so you could easily transition the lever into the latch. You have one that's rounded at the top, and you have one that's squared off. I think there's a 4th version too, but I didn't have a photograph to back up a 20-year-old memory, so we left that off. What's nice about the rocket Fett from the center there, you'll notice it was assembled without the firing mechanism, so we can get a little bit of a glimpse as to what's going on inside, into the internal cavity. And I hope you can see it, because I look at it here, the lighting's very poor, but there's a post that's in there that's built up from the chest cavity. And that's all they used to hold everything in place. On the Proto Mold, that was solved by having a whole separate piece of plastic inserted to close off the chest cavity. And for production, that would have been a extra needless step. And so that's how the Kenner engineers solved that. And then, of course, we have on the far right a shot of the four-sided missile. My favorite design, but if you ever have a chance to fire these things, they have a tendency to tumble. They just don't fire too well, which is why I think they transitioned to the eight-sided design, which fire a lot better. Not a lot better. These figures, when you do fire them, they only go maybe a foot, 2 feet, unless you're really lucky. In 30 years, I fired one 5 feet, but that's in 30 years. But you'll notice on the missile there, you have these little circular indents. Those are ejector pin marks, and that's a holdover from the four-sided missile design. That's the tool that would have pushed the part out of the mold once it was fully formed. And if you look over to the left, where I have that little arrow pointing, this is, again, a close-up of the transparency from the catalog I discussed earlier with you. And you can see where this type of missile was used in photography on the back of that one Boba Fett, which I'm presuming is a rocket Fett. I'd also want to point out that this specific eight-sided missile was the type found with the gray Fetts, which really kind of makes me wonder if the missile design was augmented at the time they were adding the copyright to the gray Fetts, or if the missile actually was already being redesigned earlier on. But that's my bit done now, so I'm going to turn things over to Daryl Johnson to discuss these missiles in a little more detail and go into the J-slots. Daryl, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Brian. You guys bear with me, it's my first panel, so kind of take it easy on me. All right, let's start talking about these. You'll see a couple of eight-sided missiles on the right-hand side of the screen. There's actually been two that surfaced. There are subtle differences. If you'll notice, the one on the left is, it's got more of a red color to it, and it has a heavier seam. This is typically the missile it's typically found with the J-slots, and it's considered more of a engineering pilot type missile. And if you look at the missile to the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see it's more of an orange in color. It seems to be made of a little bit denser plastic. And as Brian mentioned, it's got the circular ejector pin marks on it. So this missile would be considered more in a first shot type missile or a transitional missile, as it retains the ejector pin marks that was on the four-sided or L-slot missile. Let's talk about the two figures that you see pictured. You've got a long stem and a short stem J-slot. Basically, your J-slot at this stage in development is considered an engineering pilot, not really a first shot any longer. Your L-slots are your first shots. Look at the, when I'm talking about the word stem, I'm referring to the little small tab at the bottom of the slot. Like I said, you have one of those has a longer stem, the other one has a shorter stem. And basically what this was used for was it's used to lock the firing lever into position. So apparently Kenner was, the long stem had become very problematic for Kenner as it was searing off during testing. So this created a couple of different hazards. First of all, a broken tab could easily become a sharp projectile and land in or end up in a child's eye. Secondly, a broken or missing tab would create a situation to where it was far more likely to have a misfire. So you asked the question, how many of these are in existence? Long stems versus short stems? Back in the day, the long stems were a lot more scarce than the short stems, but in recent finds in recent times, we've learned that the long stems now are slightly more scarce as more long stems have shown up. As far as total production numbers, we've gotten a couple of different people. As a matter of fact, we had a testing technician say, there was anywhere from 30 to 40 of these produced, and then we've heard all the way up to 100 of these possibly produced. The engineer that I actually got my piece from, he said that there was approximately 100 of these that was produced. They were shipped in a small box, and they were used for testing purposes. Now, out of those 100 that were possibly produced, I think last count was somewhere around 24 to 26 that are currently in collectors' hands. So let me advance to the next screen. Okay, on the left-hand side, you're going to see that is the Justin Kearns example. I think also Tumbush on that one. And if you kind of look around the venue, I've heard it might be on display here, so you might be able to see it up close and personal. The picture on the right-hand side is the example that I found a few years back. That's the J-slot mailer test sample that I got from the original Kenner engineer. And I've had several people tell me to ask me to retell that story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as quickly as possible. So I think it was December of 2015. The lovely Miss Brindy out here and I took a trip up to Cincinnati from Knoxville, and we were attending a Kenner symposium, which took place in downtown Cincinnati at the library, and it was on a Saturday. So we ended up going down there and hanging out for a little while, listening to all the panels and stuff. And to make a long story short, we were there kind of late into the afternoon, and a gentleman and his wife walked in, and he walked up to, I guess, Kim Simmons, who is one of the original photographers for Kenner. If you guys, I know you guys mostly know who he is, but he had a display booth set up, and this guy walked up to Kim, took his iPhone out and showed him a picture and said, hey, he said, I've got something that I'd like to sell maybe. I don't know if you'd be interested in it or if you know anybody that would be interested. So I'd been in a conversation with Kim for probably over a year, telling him that I was actively searching for a rocket firing Fett, and Kim kind of pointed me out to him. So me and the engineer got together a few minutes later, and he asked me if I was a collector, and I said yes. So he said, well, I've got something you may be interested in. So he pulls his iPhone out, shows me a picture of a J-slot. And he says, I used to work for Kenner back in the day. I'm an engineer. I'm thinking about selling this. It's got two missiles with it, and it's got, he called it its ray gun. He said it's still got its original ray gun with it. And he said, I've also got the original box for it. Well, that didn't really sink in because I really was so excited about the prospect of me being able to potentially purchase this piece. And also, everybody knows that rocket Fetts didn't come in boxes, so I just kind of wrote that part of it off. So him and I exchanged numbers, and it took us about 2 months to come up with a number that was good for both of us, a number on price. So we finally made a deal, and Brendan and I returned to Cincinnati one Friday evening, or actually Friday night, because we got in the hotel kind of late, and I wanted to call this guy and confirm a few things. The time we're supposed to meet him in the morning, and that it did have what he said it had. I said, hey, so it's supposed to have its 2 missiles, a blaster. He goes, yeah, it's got both missiles, it's got its blaster, it's got its original box, and it's got its original plastic baggie. And he qualified that by saying, well, the baggie's not in that great a shape because the baggie's been torn open. So I'm standing there on the phone with this guy in the hotel, and I can't believe what I'm hearing at this point. I about fainted. So needless to say, I got off the phone, and I told Brendy what he had said, neither one of us got any sleep whatsoever that night. So we get up early the next morning, we head down to the library, and we go up to the 4th floor at some federal building in Cincinnati to his lawyer's office. He wanted all this transaction to take place in front of his lawyer. And so there it is, the rocket Fett, the 2 missiles, the blaster, the baggie, the box, and on top of that, he surprised me with a couple of his business cards that he still had from back in the day at Kenner. And he told me, I once again, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. So I started asking him questions about it, and he said, basically, hey, we were testing these things just to see how they would mail. He said, we used to put them through vibration testing. He mentioned drop testing. They used to do a lot of this stuff in the old Kroger building in the basement. And so we did the deal and everything, and I took the piece with me, and the first person I called was a real good buddy of mine. I got outside, and I called Steve Dwyer. He's very knowledgeable on prototypes, real good dude. He's helped me out a lot. And I sent him some pictures, and I asked him, I said, man, I don't know what I'm looking at here, but I said, I'm almost for sure one of these has never surfaced in this stage. And he was just as shocked as I was. And he made a couple phone calls just to confirm some stuff. And one of the guys he called was Chris back here. And this has never been seen before. So it was kind of really cool to be able to find something like this, because I think it's, it serves as the missing link, so to speak, and all the lore that's ever surrounded the rocket firing vet promotional program. And it was just a really neat deal. So after that, Brendy and I took the piece to a couple of other guys that live in Cincinnati to have them to look at it. And I'm sure some of you guys know them, Tracy Hamilton and Bill Wills. They sat down with us, took a look at it, and apparently Bill Wills has an engineering pilot Boba Fett with a fixed rocket in its engineering pilot stage, and it is a mailer. It's a mailer piece, and he confirmed that the baggie was 100% just like the baggie that constructed the same way that his baggie was on his particular piece. So, yeah, like I said, it was a really cool to be there at ground zero and to find a piece like this and to get it from its original source. I want to show you guys a picture that on the next slide that a lot of people have probably never seen. Those 2 pieces, those are obviously J-slots. They're mailer samples, and they surfaced about a year and a half after my piece was found. They surfaced from the exact same engineer. He had these 2 pieces. I actually knew about them about a year before they surfaced. I had kept contact with a guy. He kind of warmed up to me. He's a paranoid type guy, really nice guy, but really paranoid about stuff. And I kept contact with him for the next several months. At first, he told me he didn't have anything else. And one day I was on the phone with him. He said, I may have some other items. And I said, are you talking rocket Fett type items? He says, yeah. But he says, the problem is they're going to be over at my mother and father's house, and they're elderly. They live on the other side of Cincinnati. We're putting them in assisted living, or they're moving into assisted living next year sometime. Then we'll be able to inventory the house. And he said, I'll be able to look then. So I kept calling him every 2 or 3 months. And then finally he calls me up one day and he says, you're never going to believe what I found. I says, what'd you find? He says, I found a couple of rocket Fetts. I said, do they have the mailer boxes? He said, yes. And he said, and the cool thing is the baggies have not been opened. They're still sealed. So, yeah, those turned up, and I thought that was really cool that those turned up, pretty much a year after mine popped up. So at this time, there's 3 known examples of the mailer sample figures. And on this slide, it's just basically showing some pictures of testing. You'll see on the bottom of 1 foot, it says 0A, which means zero aging. They used to heat these things up or freeze them, and they did various tests on them. The number 5 is probably, I think that's more like the number it was within the batch. And then you'll see the figure over on the left-hand side, and you'll see the scoring on the right side of the figure. Basically, they would either heat these up, like I said, or freeze them, and then they would do the scoring marks, and then they would see, you know, if pieces would fall out or chunk out or whatever. So I want to turn this back over to Chris real quick.
All right, back on stage. Now we're at 10 minutes. I had like 16 minutes of stuff, so I think we're going to run over. I think we'll be okay. Right, Mark? You're going to let me run over a little bit, right? All right, thank you. All right, so what else was going on while all this engineering work was going on here? November 78, this is from Kenner Newsletter. Boba Fett made an appearance in Cincinnati. A lot of photos in this. A lot of people were taking their photos. They sent one of the actor in costume down from Lucasfilm. Do a little promotion because in November 78, oh, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. While they were there, they did a photo shoot. And you see the photo in the middle, the photographer taking the photo of Boba Fett. That ended up being the impetus for the artwork for the card bag. So you can see he's firing the flamethrower, and the guy's taking the photo from that particular angle. So it's pretty interesting that during that visit that photo shoot turned into the actual figure packaging. The holiday special. That's why they were there in Kenner in November, because this was Boba Fett's debut, and first time is really seen. It's going to debut in TV special, the cartoon segment of the holiday special. And there was a lot of excitement there with Kenner and Boba Fett and this new guy, but there was also something else brewing in popular culture at the time. These guys, Battlestar Galactica, huge at the time. Basically a clone of Star Wars. You can see the cover of Newsweek there, Son of Star Wars. Some of the people that worked on Star Wars worked on Battlestar Galactica. Lucasfilm ended up suing the creators of Battlestar Galactica for stealing his idea. The show debuted in September 78, but in August 78 they started selling the toys, and the toys were immediately popular. Great price points. And they had 4 vehicles. All the vehicles shot these little 1 1/4-inch missiles, and that was the key selling feature of the toy. That was the primary play feature, and everyone had these, and they were selling like hotcakes. They were all over the place, and as would have it, as more people own things and more opportunities for things to happen, these missiles cause a little problems. Now they're 1 1/4 inches long. Is not long, it's this long. It's about exactly as the length of the Boba Fett missile. So, roll around about December, Mattel had entertained too many phone calls and too many instances where kids were shooting these things at their faces, at their mouths. There was a couple at this point that were aspirated or inhaled. So the missiles were going, not just swallowing the missiles inhaled into the lungs that was surgically removed. So at this point, Mattel had to add stickers to their stock in their inventory. So they printed these up, went through the inventory, slapped these labels on them: do not point or fire the rodent missile towards your mouth or face. So this is early December 78. This announcement was released by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Mattel was on board, and this was their solution at that point to these few instances of these missile instances. Now, Kenner looks like they followed suit, because on their original Boba Fett card back, they had actually printed at the top, "Do not launch projectile towards face." So they sort of addressed this, because this development work was sort of going on at the same time. And Kenner is aware of these safety issues. I mean, this was going into the public sphere with the CPSC announcements, but also internally the toy industry. And then what happened here, December 78. So not just a few weeks after those stickers were put on the toys, it happened. A 4-year-old in Atlanta had a Cylon Raider, and he shot the missile into his mouth. It got stuck in his larynx. He was asphyxiated, and that was on Christmas. And December 31st, he died. So January 11th, 10 days later, the next announcement comes out with Mattel and the CPSC. Mattel's instituting a recall of their missiles. So they instituted this program called the Missile Mail-In Program. So they encouraged parents, take your missiles and mail them into us. We'll give you a Hot Wheels car, sort of as substitution for the loss of play that you get. They made these new stickers that says, and they redesigned the toys at this point. So early January, they were recalling the inventories, and they did their best to recall the missiles that were out in public. And they put the label on the toy to let you know, okay, now the toys don't fire. Now that was the primary selling feature of these toys. So, but the ironic thing is, at the same time, you had more parents writing to them wanting to buy more missiles because these missiles were getting lost. So they weren't aware of this recall, and they were just trying to get more missiles to replace the ones that had been gone. So that was January 79. So a lot of these things are happening pretty quickly. And so you have the death, first warnings in early December, then the death at the end of the year, and January 11th here, there's the recall. So by the time Toy Fair rolls around, Kenner decides, right after that January announcement, Lucasfilm Legal and the head of quality approached the president of Kenner, and they said, we recommend that we pull this safety feature, we pull this missile due to the safety concerns, because they were just giving Boba Fett figures away, and this missile was the exact same as the other one, as the other toy. So the decision was made, yes, we're going to pull this feature from this figure. So by the time Toy Fair came out, there's a photograph here of the Toy Fair display, of the Star Wars figures display from Toy Fair at Kenner. I've zoomed in here. You can see there's a loose Boba Fett, a carded Boba Fett. The Boba Fett card does not say point missile, do not point the missile towards face. On the back of the card back, you can see they've created the sticker to cover up the offer. I'll go here a little closer so you can see this is what the card back looked like. So they just created that sticker. And in the Toy Fair catalog at the time, the picture of Boba Fett was just a loose figure here. It just says Boba Fett has a laser rifle and a backpack, which is kind of silly to say has a backpack because it's not extra piece. So I thought what probably happened is it probably used to say has a laser rifle and a backpack with 2 spring-launched rockets, because that's what the promotions had said earlier. And you saw from Daryl's photos there was 2 rockets included, and that pamphlet I showed you initially had 2 rockets. So I think that's, and you can see like pretty easily they got rid of this from a marketing standpoint. Pretty easy to make these changes between January and Toy Fair, which was in February. But one interesting thing is the figure that was used on display in Toy Fair turned up 20 years ago. Happened the guy who actually took it from the display was an attendee of Toy Fair, and he had made contact with a guy who knew a collector, and the collector is is a friend of ours, and this collector knew all the right collectors to contact, and there were phone calls going around. This was late 1999, and we were flabbergasted. It was like, this doesn't make sense that this is. Anyway, it didn't take long to realize, man, this makes a lot of sense. And then Ron Salvatore remembered a slide that had turned up like a year prior, and he says, I think there's a photo of this. And he was able to look at it and see that the Boba Fett imagery is not the same on this Toy Fair figure as it was for a production figure. Anyway, they used a rocket firing. This is a J-slot prototype used in this. And some of you guys may have seen this figure turned up on Pawn Stars a couple years ago, I think it was. So interesting to see how, and they didn't promote this figure as rocket firing. They just used one of the prototypes in this packaging for the Toy Fair display. And here's a close-up to show how the Toy Fair one was different from the production one. And you can see the fireballs are immediately different there. So, and they've moved the positioning of the figure a little bit. But that little bit there in Ron's keen eye we were able to totally validate that piece, because nobody even really knew that there was a different earlier version of the card back. Now, since then, images of this early proof card had shown up. So right around this time, still early, late 78, early 79, they had done a commercial that was going to introduce this premium, the free rocket firing, free Boba Fett with purchase of other figures. And a lot of you guys probably seen that on YouTube. This is a picture of the one of the original tape reels, and you can see the name. It says Boba Fett Rev, which is revised. It's on the leader too. And if you look closely above the guy's finger, that's an L-slot Boba Fett. So what they probably did was film this with a rocket firing segment in the commercial, and probably when they removed this feature, they just cut that bit out showing how they were firing it. So they used, and as Brian mentioned, one of the proto molded stages probably, because this has a split in the neck and the head's a little bit tall. Anyway, so there's another instance where they use an actual prototype in their promotions. Now this is a much later stage Boba Fett, just to go show you, finally, at this point, the next tooling stage after the J slot was like they got to fill this slot in, and you end up with a plain Boba Fett. The slot's gone, and the next, and I'm almost the one slide after this. Right now, the Rocket Fett's not dead because you guys all, and this is what would have come out with the notes to the consumers, rocket launcher's been reduced for safety reasons. But if you go looking through your stashes of figures, you will see remnants of the slots still there on loose Boba Fett. So you can go through and look at that. You can see the J slot and all that. And anyway, and we're done. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. So we're just going to have a quick little music break to while we change around the stage, and then we have the Power Rangers coming up for you guys. Thank you guys again.
Said she's leaving out for Nashville. Packed her bags and said goodbye. She's gonna leave the small town. Oh, gonna leave it behind. Place her dreams through a sixth string. Neon lights too bright to hide. With a song from a broken heart. Oh, she's gonna let it shine. Yes, she dreams. Small town girl too far from home. Another song from a broken heart. Oh, yeah, she left it behind. As she dreams in Nashville, where the stars shine so bright. chasing